Okay. We had these problems yesterday, if you recall. We had a few glitches with my Wi-Fi in my house. There's not a lot I can do about that structurally now, but at least we were doing so great up until that moment. So we'll wait for some people to join us. In the meantime, let me review where we were at. Ms. Adamson was telling us some of the challenges that the county has been facing the last few days. And I was making connections between what you will study in government and civics class about how government works and at the local, state, and federal level. Okay, so I was talking about how important it is to let bureaucrats. I don't know who Take Kenny is, so I'm going to remove him. I apologize if that is a student I'm supposed to know, but the image just didn't look familiar to me. And if you'll contact me on Remind, I can add you back. We were talking about the challenges of being an elected official at this time and letting bureaucrats do their jobs to solve really complex problems quickly. Okay, so let's pick up there, Ms. Adamson.
Hey there. So we met on Monday, and we did what I thought was the county manager is only allowed to reallocate up to $50,000. So the first thing we did at our meeting was we allocated $2 million to the COVID-19 effort.
How many millions?
2 million.
Okay.
And that's probably just a start.
Okay.
And you're right. We are the first people that can get these resources deployed is your county and your city government, is to just get resources flowing to the effort. And that, of course, will go to feeding or whatever is needed. We gave the county manager some framework, but basically said, we trust you. You know what you need. Here's this money. We meet again in 2 weeks. Let us know how it's going. We did do some really basic county business that needed to do, but that was our focus, was to get funds flowing. And now that we have the framework to accept volunteers, what we didn't want to have happen at one site, 200 parents show up.
Right.
And it sort of clogs everything up, and we can't get folks served with our new curbside delivery idea. And some sites have nobody and not be able to serve the people that come through. So now on the press release, on the Wake County Public Schools website, on my social media, is a really nice form. You put your information in, and they'll deploy when you need you. Now, some groups have done their own food drives and handing out to a specific group. I know Inload did a huge one and gave lots of bags of groceries to their families. That's fine to supplement what we're doing, because the government can't do it alone. That's, we applaud them. But for our effort, we needed to get the framework set up, because we had folks with a lot of really good ideas that we just didn't think was feasible.
I'm here for Mackenzie. Mackenzie wants that form, and I filled out that form, so I will post it on Remind and also on this channel.
So there was a group of folks that wanted to take bags of groceries to fire stations, police departments. Mm-hmm. And that sounds on the surface like a really good idea. Mm-hmm. But in this situation, it's really not, because we cannot risk exposing our first responders. Mm-hmm. If somebody sick came up, mm-hmm. or got sick in a few days, and one of our first responders interacted with them, we'd have to take them down for 2 weeks. Right. And we just can't risk that. Plus, you don't want a crowd of people at your first responder sites, because they've got a job to do. And if there's a fire, you don't need cars in the way of trying to get the trucks out and plus our fire stations, they're our medical first responders. They're all EMTs as well. Mm-hmm. So if you call and have an emergency, whoever is closest to you, we're sending, whether it's a fireman, policeman, an EMT, we're getting them to you. And then, of course, once the situation starts to get stabilized, then the EMTs always take over. So I know for folks that were really frustrated, wanting to help, because that's one of the things in Wake County we do the best, is we help each other.
Yeah, we really do.
We do. We do have some generous people, and we want to come to help everybody. But sometimes you kind of got to wait on that coordinated effort and then move in, unless you have a neighbor you want to help, an elderly relative,
You can think hyper locally in the meantime. And that's what I told my students is, until the structure gets built, you can think hyper locally.
Now, the next area we'll move into is housing. Because these folks that just became unemployed, now the governor did open up some unemployment benefits yesterday.
Yes, that is really important. So now the state is coming in. So, okay, local has been the most adaptive. What I read this morning in the paper, I was very interested this morning. Today's the first day while I was reading the paper where I started thinking, here it goes. Okay, the government at every level is starting to adapt. So let me give you all a quick little current events update. We have at the state level, the governor has made it easier for you to get unemployment benefits. So if your parents are looking at reduced hours, they don't actually have to lose their job anymore. Is if they are facing reduced hours, they can apply for unemployment benefits. And that is important because it means that cash could start flowing from the state government to households. Now, I have a question about that, Ms. Adamson. Do you think they need to go to a place?
No, you can do it all online.
Do it all online. That's very important adaptation.
One of the other things the governor did that's huge. Normally, when you go onto unemployment, the first week is a non-benefit week.
Right.
And you start getting it. Well, now you can get them the first week. And the second thing he did that's really good, normally you have to do so many job searches a week to get your benefits. Well, right now, that's not realistic.
Right. You're wasting your time.
Well, not only you wasted your time, but you don't want that face-to-face. And you have to do like face-to-face contacts and, you just don't want that. And for a lot of our small businesses that have had to reduce, like hotels, convention centers, when they get back up and running, and there will be a recovery, when they get back up and running, they want those people back because they're trained, they know their system.
That's right.
They're ready to start working again. So that's huge. But now the unemployment benefits are not going to replace a working income. So the next place we're headed is housing. And fortunately, Chief Justice Beasley gave us some help when she pulled the court systems down for 30 days because she's only doing what she considers like mission critical tasks.
Let me translate that for you because that's so exciting. Okay, I've not heard about that. I knew the judicial system was doing this, but I've not heard the mechanisms by which it happened. But in order for you to lose your home, foreclosure or eviction or those things, the courts are involved in taking those steps. So Justice Beasley, she is the first African-American female Chief Justice of our state Supreme Court. So cool. She has decided to close down court proceedings that carry out those functions for the next, how many days? 30 days. So that buys the county government some time to get a plan together for what to do about newly evicted homeless people who've been unable to.
Or we can come in with part of this $2 million because we already have a program in place, the structure to help people preserve their housing. Right. So under some conditions, and they're pretty tight conditions, we will help you pay your rent to keep you housed. So now that since we have actually that framework just started this year, since we have that framework, we can just infuse more money into it and go ahead. And we've started a system to try to let folks who've lost their employment know that this program is available. Now, this one you're absolutely going to have to apply for because we give the money directly to your landlord or your mortgage holder. No, nothing goes to you.
Okay.
Because, if we're going to preserve housing, we have to make sure that's where the money goes.
Right. And we want to protect taxpayer dollars that are being invested in this, make sure they end up where we intend them to go.
Right. So there is an application process for that. But now we have set up 6 or 7 locations with nonprofits and some of our agencies that take the applications. So we keep people spread out.
Wow.
And now, unfortunately, that one we're probably never going to be able to do completely online. There will need to be some in-person interview. Okay. Now, whether that'll go to some online format, I don't know, because
Oh, okay.
a lot of people who are in that situation may not have online capacity.
I see what you're
And
saying.
with
They may
our-
not have internet. They may not have
internet or have very limited package.
So FaceTime them on their phones.
Yeah,
That's an interesting idea.
yeah, but right now it's still an in-person application because we haven't changed from what our normal application process is. But we've got this infusion of cash, so we can help people preserve their housing. So once the recovery happens, they've still got a place to live.
All right, I have a student here who's asking,
Sure.
this is important. So we know that the unemployment benefits that people receive are paid for by their payroll taxes. So the one good thing about the unemployment system is that it's already built and you can draw benefits normally. So this isn't they don't have to build this system. It exists. They just need to make sure it has adequate funds. Now my students are losing their jobs.
Yes.
Also. But my understanding is that if you're under 18 or you're dependent on your parents' taxes, you cannot receive unemployment benefits. Is that right?
I have no idea.
Okay. We're going to follow up on that.
We'll find out.
I would be surprised, wouldn't you?
I would be surprised if there's benefits for that.
That's why I've been encouraging them to think about how to fill other needs in the economy, like childcare.
Yes, yes.
Or figuring out how to engage in deliveries to vulnerable people in your neighborhood who maybe don't want to go to the store because they're elderly. So, I know that isn't a great answer, but that's my
hypothetical answer. Talked to some small business people who have cleaning services, who do, home maintenance type activities. And they said they're booming because people are working from home.
Right.
And whereas if you wanted somebody to come in and paint your trim or clean your trim, you have to take time off from work for that to happen. Right. Now that they're working from home, it's a great opportunity to get these type of yard work, that kind of stuff done.
That is a great point because I've been encouraging them our families, since they're the most adaptive, that we have to make our homes we have to reinvest in our homes and making them a nice place to live. So she's exactly right, people. I have been out in my yard last few days, weeding, digging. I'm about to get mulch delivered. Yeah. There's all kinds of home improvement projects I now can actually attend to in my household, but I'm able-bodied. I'm telling you, you might want to go knock on some doors and ask if you can pull weeds. It is spring, and those weeds are coming up all over the place, and they're a mess. And you might surprise yourself at what kinds of money-making opportunities exist right on your street. And I know it's awkward, and I know you're teenagers, and you don't even like talking on the phone, much less knocking on strangers' doors. Okay, I got all that. It's a teachable moment. Your life going forward is going to probably be involved in creating business opportunities like this. So you might as well, today, just get your mind thinking in that way. Tomorrow, go knock on 3 doors, scaffold yourself to it. Okay. You don't have to start a yard business today and start a website. Okay. But don't you think, Ms. Adamson, if you really need to replace your income,
yes,
these might be ways to do it.
Absolutely. Or contact your grocery stores. They are swamped.
Yes.
Grocery stores are hiring right now because they're just swamped with business, especially a lot of grocery stores, and I'm sure you've seen this in the media, has went to where they're closing early at 9 o'clock so they can clean the store and restock.
So all that cleaning that has to be done.
All the cleaning that has to be done and stocking that, overnight to get ready for the rush of folks the next day. Yeah. So there's a lot of jobs in that area.
She's right. Michelle Cash just told me her son has been working 12 to 14-hour shifts a day.
Yes.
That's not sustainable.
No, it's not sustainable, but in the short term, because I've heard some food service folks that were lucky enough to snag some of these jobs to just be able to keep moving. So that's kind of where we're at with county government. And when we start looking at the long term, we're really dependent on sales taxes. Sales tax is one of our big revenue streams, as is the state of North Carolina. Now, people are still buying crazy amounts at the grocery store, but that's a 2% sales tax.
Oh, because we don't tax food as high as we tax things like hospitality and.
Right. And we also have a special hospitality tax
Mhm.
on hotel rooms and prepared meals.
It's high,
And
which
it's
means
high.
it brings in a lot of money.
And typically our citizens don't pay it, others pay it.
You tax your visitors.
That's right. That's right. We like taxing our visitors, right? Because they can't get mad and vote us out.
That makes perfect sense.
Because we have a 6% tax on hotel. A big chunk of our sales tax comes from the hospitality industry, and we're basically closed for business right now. We pulled all our advertising we could pull to try to preserve capital. But so we were supposed to start our budget process. Our budget year starts July 1st on Monday. Well, we're going to give staff 3 more weeks to try to figure out where we're at, because the budget we were looking at 2 weeks ago is a very different budget going forward. And there's a lag time in how we know what our sales tax is, because people, the businesses at the end of the month remit it to the state, and they split it up and remit it to us. So we're going into a budget when we don't have a good grasp of what potentially our revenue is.
All right, so let me translate that in normal language for teenagers. Okay, so what she's saying is, when you go to the store and you buy things, you have a sales tax applied. Well, those businesses keep a bucket where they put all that tax money they've collected, and at the end of the month, they turn it over to the county and the state. The county and the state get a part of it, right? Mm-hmm. So what she's saying is, at the same time that the county is spending more money, they're starting to realize they're going to be bringing in much less money. Revenue is money coming into the government. Expenditures is money going out of the government. So, okay, let me tell you what this is making me think. This is making me think that the state could be an important supplement to local efforts, especially since our state government is, to some degree, has strong Republican majorities who believe that you should devolve funds down to the smallest level of government closest to the people. Maybe, and they have a $2 billion surplus, right?
Yeah. So when state legislators have been calling and asking me what we need, I'm like, money. Just
money.
We need money flowing right now. And of course, we needed that unemployment opened up, so citizens could start because there's no way as county government we could take on 50,000 service industry people that were just out of it. We can't take, we just not big enough for that. And the third thing, and once I'm finished talking about this, then I'll start taking questions. But one of the things that's antiquated in the states, we are what's called a Dillon rule state, and there's only like 2 of those in the country, and we're one of them.
I'm about to learn something. Oh my God, I'm so excited.
The Dillon rule state is your local county commissioners, and that's in all 50 counties. We are basically quasi-legislators. Whereas in like South Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, their local officials are completely separate from their state governments. And they have a lot more power to dictate what goes on in their county than we do. But because we're a quote Dillon rule state, and we are considered, actually, for the Board of Elections, we're considered legislators, is our state legislators have a lot of power over what counties do.
Okay. My translation of this is when we talk about how the counties and the cities don't have what's called home rule.
That's it, home rule. That's it.
There's no home rule.
We call that
basically
rule.
The state legislature could dissolve Wake County tomorrow.
Yes.
They could change her terms, her election year they have. So our local officials are, I don't mean to say this in front of one of my local officials, they're kind of at the mercy of the state legislature.
At the mercy of the state legislature.
Which is a little.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I actually went before and testified in front of the state legislature and stood up for how we should have, local government. And they were like, honey, no, they don't actually have any authority separate from us.
No, we don't. So some things we do have some authority on, but that's only because the state legislators have given it to us.
That's right.
So with our meetings, the state statutes are set up, and of course they were set up way before any technology, is our public meetings have to be in person, to be considered a proper public meeting.
Oh my gosh, they do.
The media has to have access to us, which means they have to be in the room with us. Now, whether the audience has to physically be in the room with us or not, there's some gray in there. Because when we had our meeting on Monday, I think this is really sort of an arrogant thing for me to say, but we had the governor last week did a conference call with all county commissioners. And I was fortunate enough to be able to go into the call. And he said, I need y'all healthy. Y'all need to really limit face-to-face time. And that's the first time I realized sort of the responsibility of a local official is we're mission critical. Because with the way the state statutes are set up now, if we cannot get we're a 7-member board, 4 is a quorum. If we cannot physically get 4 of us in the building, in the room, we cannot have a public meeting and we cannot pass business. So if they could not have gotten 4 of us in the room on Monday, physically in the room with the public having access to us, which means the media had to be in the same room with us. And apparently there's some gray whether the audience members and the public who wanted to come witness the meeting could be in a separate room and videoed in. That's apparently a gray area that a lot of lawyers are looking at. But there's and so the governor last week in one of his emergency proclamations, he thought he had covered the fact that we could do some virtual setup. Well,
with his state of emergency.
With one of his state of emergency powers. Well, the UNC School of Government, who rules on these things, and our legal counsel have decided that he doesn't have the power to do that. That only person that can change it is the state legislator, because we're not home rule, we're Dillon rule. So we cannot change that for ourselves. So that's when the governor was saying, y'all are mission critical, y'all got to be healthy.
Okay, and the state legislature is not supposed to come back into town to meet. Now here they've got the same problem. They probably have no business coming together in this General Assembly building meeting. They're all older. A lot of them are older, retired. That's why they can take a part-time job for $13,000 a year, basically. Right. Wow. So they're not supposed to even come back until the 23rd. They've talked about coming back on April 15th.
Right.
A statute we know is a law passed by the state legislature. They could pass a law trying to remedy this and allow us to have meetings that are through technology,
right,
and votes that are through technology,
right,
but it has to actually happen.
Right. And so when I first became a county commissioner, I had heard stories about, when we've had other events, Big Snows, Fran, where if I needed to vote on something, they would send somebody to collect me. And Betty Lou Ward, who was a commissioner for like 28 years and kind of a legend, her district was unincorporated Wake County. And apparently there's an urban legend with commissioners that at one point they needed her in to vote on money for a snow event. And they sent a snowplow out to get her, so they could physically get her in the building so she could vote. Well,
to meet the rule of law.
Because
this is a government based on the rule of law.
Right.
And if you start cheating and start breaking laws like that, you can't say you're a society that's run by the rule of law anymore.
And potentially any business we pass is not valid. But nobody ever thought that it could be a situation where there's a pandemic and your county commissioners physically cannot get there. Even if you send a policeman to get on a public works truck to cut trees out of the way, right, if it's a hurricane, or a snowplow to get you if it's a big snowstorm.
We need to make a law that says during a state of emergency, we can waive these meeting laws.
Right.
But we haven't done that yet.
A pandemic, or give the governor the power to do it.
Right.
So he could decide what the limits on that are. Right. So what we did for our meeting on Monday is we moved the front seating from our normal room, so nobody was within 6 feet of us. We spread the audience out. No, it was really, they spread us out more than 6 feet. We came in, we stayed away from each other because they're right. Because it's not a quorum of who's there. It's a quorum of the commission. It's for us.
Yeah, a quorum means enough people to do business, and it's usually a majority.
It's majority, and for us, the majority is 4.
Because there's how many commissioners? 7. Yeah.
So majority is 4. So if there's only 6 there, the majority doesn't become 3. The majority is always
4.
So if we were to get sick, whatever, we are, or some of us were to get quarantined, or
the whole local government could be literally frozen.
Right.
In terms of decisions that need to be made.
Yes. So when state legislators are calling me, I'm like, get this changed. We need to be able to have, under some really, really dire circumstances, we need to be able to vote remotely.
Gosh, Vicki, I'm feeling like you need to back up further into the kitchen.
So I have been taking that very seriously.
Yes, you're literally protecting your body.
Protecting my body, because at some point I may have to go in to vote
in the middle of the night.
In the middle of the night.
Or
we basically do it in the middle of the night, but if you got
to meet the letter of the law. And the letter of the law is that 4 of you have to be in a room.
Yes, we
bottom line.
And
until
we
that
have
changes.
to have citizens accessible to us, and now and the media accessible to us while this meeting is going on. So we're not quite sure. Now, our legal counsel is really comfortable that the media has to be in the room with us. They physically have to be in the same room. And apparently they're trying to decide if there's enough gray area. Could we move the audience members to a room near us with some video and give them an opportunity to do typical public comment? When they want to do public comment, do we have to bring them in the room with us? And I hate to feel like a germaphobe and like, oh gosh, I'm so special that,
No, this is just real.
It's just as real.
It's just real.
Because, we had to be able to move money on Monday. That was just the reality of it.
The decision being made to move that money could only be made by 4 or more of you. And if y'all aren't in the room to make it, that it can't happen. Correct. Under the rule of law.
Right, because under the rule of law, the county, and see, we're also what's called a county management form of government. So the county manager has a tremendous amount of power.
Remember that when we had these reforms under the progressive era in the early 1900s, a lot of local governments moved to what we call a council manager system, which means people like Miss Adamson, who are popular in the community and well trusted by the citizens, they can get elected. But just because they've been elected doesn't mean they know how to run government.
Right.
It's like if the most popular people in the high school got elected to be the principal. Okay. So what they decided to make government more efficient and run better is that they would hire a professional manager. Okay. So on the day-to-day running of the county, we have a professional manager, and I should know his name. Is it
David Ellis?
Oh, it's new. How long has he been on the job?
About 2 years. The poor dude.
No. Yeah, David Ellis is his name. Maybe I know the city manager better because he's my husband's boss. Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah, so he can only move $50,000. Well, for an effort like that, $50,000 is just not enough money. Because what the assumption is that your elected officials, our number one job is to protect tax dollars and make sure that they are spent like the citizens want. So that's why we don't report to anybody but the citizens. So staff can administer our policies and have a lot of leeway to do that, but they can't allocate money because at some point when the government was set up, there was a decision that elected officials was one that could do that. So now what we did do, we were able on Monday to suspend policy because we did declare a state of emergency in Wake County that gives David, our county manager, a lot of leeway on how this money's allocated. We gave him a framework of what we expected the money to be spent on, but we basically said it's your discretion because we need to be nimble right now. And when we declare a state of emergency, that also changes a lot of our purchasing policies because we're government. As a commissioner, my job is to protect your tax dollars and make sure they're spent like the citizens want them spent.
I bet I know where this is going. So normally, if you're going to spend taxpayer money to buy things, there's this whole procurement process
Yes.
of you have to you say, we need 10,000 takeout trays,
Right.
and we're going to let all these companies bid,
Yes.
and we're going to figure out what the lowest price is, and then we're going to make a decision about which vendor we're going to use, and we're going to enter into a contract with them.
Yes.
What I bet you're about to say here is that the county government during this time period needed to find 10,000 trays, and when they found them, and they thought they just need to buy them.
Yes, yes. And we gave him the authority. The state of emergency changes procurement. And us saying, we're giving you this money, and for this particular pot, normally we say this is specifically what this money is to be spent on. Right. And you can change 50,000 of it. But if you want to do more than that, you got to come to us. And so we basically said, here's $2 million. Procurement is suspended. We trust you. You're a professional manager. We hired you for a particular reason, and spend it. And one of the things that came to the top of my mind is for our first responders. We fortunately, the person in charge of our EMS was smart enough in December when this thing started getting crazy in China to stock up on a bunch of masks and protective gear for our first responders.
Wow.
So we are fortunate.
Give that person a raise.
Oh yeah, they are. Yeah. Kudos. But if we start to run low, and fortunately we haven't yet, but because that stuff is so scarce in the marketplace, because we can't get it, if they find a vendor that's got it, we got to buy it, and not 2 days later, or a week later, somebody else has bought it.
Mm-hmm. We can't take
it. Right. If you get on there and we get it, bring it in. Because one of the things I was really impressed with when I got to our meeting on Monday is our staff had found an individual bottle for each of us to use of hand sanitizer. And I was like, how'd y'all get this?
Gold.
Gold. Is this for us to take home? I'm like, how did y'all do that? And we're like, we got you covered. So
impressive.
And we put a lot of more sanitizing stations in our buildings that have to remain open for the county to function. So it was.
But you know what?
We can't be waiting 2 weeks and taking bids on hand sanitizer.
They know how valuable your body is now too. That we need 4 of you in the building to give them the flexibility to do what it is that they need.
So this is unprecedented, and it's reality, and we will come out of it. There'll be a recovery. But I'm going to take questions now.
We have gone on, but you know what? This was so cool, Vicki, because it integrated so much of the things we study in the social studies: history, civics, the 3 levels of government, the rule of law. I mean, the Dillon rule, which we now know is also the same as home rule. So Jessica had a question. She said, would it be better for North Carolina local government to have home rule? I bet, here, I'll make a prediction. This is critical thinking. This is me thinking aloud, modeling critical thinking. I'm betting if you ask a local government official if they should have home rule authority, I'm betting they're going to say yes.
We would love that. The state would have to give it to us. They're never going to do that.
We need to get a state rep here.
Yes, we do.
We need to get a state rep here next.
Right. And ask them. And please, students, tell them county commission needs to be able to
have home rule.
Well, not just, I'm not even.
And then just give them money.
Right, give us money, and we need the ability to do some type of telemeetings.
Pass the statute.
Especially if you get a couple of commissioners that are sick, and we physically can't come in, that we could roll over time.
Don't you think they want that for themselves too? Wouldn't they like during the state of emergency to be able to make statutes?
Absolutely.
In a new way. I think as a citizen, I would be okay with that.
Yeah. And I would be okay if they just give the governor the authority
to declare the circumstances
and protocols. And it's not just us. All county commissions and across the state have the same issue. And we're lucky that we have, in some of the smaller counties, they don't have the technology we do. They don't have the technology staffs. Because one of the things we did in our order on Monday was we added in there that our IT staff is to assist Wake Tech and Wake County Public Schools in any way they can to help get teleclasses set up. So, so we didn't just give the school system money, which I'm sure they're going to need some,
Right.
but we don't know what that is yet.
You
But
gave
we
them some
said
new
what we
capacities.
need is capacity to do this, and we've got an IT staff, so we'll just put an official order in place that they're to assist the Wake County Public School IT staff in any way needed. We'll just send them over and let them help.
That's cool.
And that means any resources we have that they need, they could deploy them for that use. Because that was the first thing that's needed if this goes on, which most likely it is longer than 2 weeks, is some capacity for students to keep learning.
All right. Another question was, and I can just answer this one really quickly because then we need to get on to a lot more questions that people might have. Mackenzie's saying, basically you're saying that county commissioners cannot do many things without the state legislature's permission. That's true, but they can give standing permission by just passing a law.
Yes.
Okay, so it's kind of like your parents, you know. They can establish rules and expectations for the household, and then you just function according to those rules. But if the county or city governments ever want the state to change the rules, they have to actually get them to pass a new statute. They can't do it themselves.
That's correct.
So that's the deal. All right, Jessica wants to know if we think Trump, not we, so at this point, I'm gonna let Ms. Adamson speak for herself, and anything I say is just my opinion and not, you know. Ms. Feely, do you think Trump calling the corona the Chinese virus was just him being ignorant or an actual mistake? Like a misunderstanding of him trying to say it originated in China? Because my parents had a big debate about it yesterday night. My dad thinks he meant it originated in China, but my mom was calling him racist and ignorant. As a household that has a Republican and a Democrat in it, as the heads of household, I do not really want to step into a family feud about whether Trump is racist or ignorant, to be honest. I think it would be nice during this time period if we would give our elected officials some grace, that we are all learning together. And I think it's entirely possible the president was ignorant about this virus. I think I was ignorant about this virus 2 weeks ago. I do not think the president is a superhero who is all-knowing and knows things 3 years in advance. So if I'm going to give myself grace that I'm learning and adapting as quickly as possible, then I would like to give other people grace. There are people who may not want to give the president very much grace, and I understand that, but we're in a national emergency. If there's ever a time to put our partisan attitudes aside, I would say it's this one. And I'm encouraged because the thing we haven't talked about is at the federal level, I'm now seeing the federal government talking about giving money directly to people in households, maybe over $1,000. And that's a very hard thing for Republicans to agree to because they do not believe in handing out money to people in general. They think it undermines the work ethic and lots of other political philosophical positions. But I'm hearing people like Tom Cotton and other people get on board with that. So I think that's an extension of the idea that strange times lead to incredible needs to reach across party lines.
My comment on that is, well, I come from a very liberal household. My husband is British, and he was the Labour Party, so he is a card-carrying socialist. He is more.
Wow.
He is more.
You're married to a socialist in America.
In America, so he is further left than I am. And as you know, being on the county commission is a partisan seat. We run as a party. One of my take on your question is we have to be more gentle with each other. Everybody's nerves are frayed. I mean, my husband and I have been biting each other's heads off, and we normally don't do that. So last night we sort of had to call a truce and just try to understand that we're both scared. You know, he's scared for his employment, how long this is going to drag on, can he take care of his family? I'm scared for my family, I'm scared for the county, and because it's unknown and it's changed so fast. It's changed. It's not like a recession that comes on slowly over a year or 2 years. This is like we woke up one day and we're living in Oz. It's just so different. So, and one of the questions that I have gotten a lot is, do I think the president's doing what he needs to do? I do not have time right now to ponder that question, but I do know, and what my professional staff has told me, that in the past, when they've had, of course, they've never had anything similar to this, but they've had a whole lot more support from the CDC. And right now, we have about zero support from the CDC, which makes us grumpier because we feel like we're flying by ourselves. We feel, that we don't have that federal support. And the testing kit question. There's been some messaging coming out of the White House that there's ample supply of test kits. We, as Wake County, that have 1,100,000 citizens, as of 5 o'clock yesterday, had received and administered 68 tests. 68. And we have been promised by the CDC shipments starting a week ago Friday. You're going to have them. No shipment happens. No shipment happens. We were promised 1,500 more this week. We have no idea if they'll show up. And we have literally hundreds of citizens that we have asked to self-quarantine that we cannot test to see if they're positive. And what happens with the testing, if we can't find out if you're positive or not, we do not backtrack who you came in contact with, who's potentially been exposed, who we could get a health worker to call them and say, hey, when you ate at Zest restaurant last week, the table beside of you.
Wait, is it really Zest? We don't
really Zest.
Oh, okay. So that's a real thing. We're not.
It's a real thing.
Okay.
We're not. We really had.
We don't want to start rumors.
Right. We really had one at Zest. Okay. We can't call you and say you had dinner there on this day. The table beside of you was a symptomatic person who's later tested positive for the coronavirus. We're asking you to please, for 2 weeks, self-quarantine. And at that point, a health worker will call you twice a day and ask for you to get your temperature. And once your temperature spikes, which is the big symptom that we look for, that you've got the high viral load, at that point, we'll try to get you tested. We have testing kits available to do that with. So we know that as of 5 o'clock yesterday, our number was 17 positive in Wake County. And we know if we had 1,000 or 1,500 tests that we could get administered and processed, that number would probably be in the 3 figures. Because we have citizens now who have gotten symptomatic, who thank good, because until we get a positive test, once you get a positive test, we write an isolation order on you, and you are commanded to isolate in your home. Now, if you are sick and need to the level of needing hospital care, you will be getting that care in a hospital. But we need you to recover in place, because we've also gotten a lot of questions about why aren't all the people who are positive in hospitals. One, they don't need to be in a hospital, and we need to save our hospital space for people who really need it. A lot of people do fine, recover at home. They're sick for sometimes days, weeks on end. So far, we've had one gentleman that ran a fever for 3 weeks. And public health will administer your health care at home. Just that's less exposure. So we have had people who we suspected were positive, negative flu tests, were, had a known contact. And
since recovered, and we'll never count them.
Right.
Because they never got tested.
Right. Because once they're no longer symptomatic, their viral load is not high enough to show up on the test, which is similar with the flu test and strep test. If you're not sick enough, you just won't have enough virus to show up on the test.
Okay, so my takeaway from what you're saying is that we're going to extend grace to people who cannot. But we do know that the president called this a hoax for a very long time until recently.
Yeah.
And that could have prevented the CDC from being as proactive as they could have been about accepting tests that were offered by the World Health Organization.
Yes. And yesterday, it was very interesting. I watched his press conference. And when his director of National Health and Human Services spoke, one of the reporters pressed her about tests, that they were hearing from local officials that they can't get their hands on tests. And she said, oh, we have plenty of tests. We have millions of tests. And he said, well, are they being deployed now? how are you deploying this? How are you getting the local government? And I'm sitting there like,
You're like, I can't wait to hear the answer to this question.
I mean, the governor's staff has literally called European nations trying to buy them.
Mhm.
I mean, and all 50 states are doing it. It's not just us.
Right.
We're trying to get private providers. Finally, last week, the FDA approved private providers to do it, which is like LabCorp or hospitals. But now they have to get wrapped up. They have to get staffed. They have to get trained. So
All behind the 8 ball.
we're all behind the 8 ball. And we're 2 weeks into this thing.
So how did the Trump administration answer?
So she said, and so then they asked, well, how are you deploying these?
Okay.
She said, well, they have to send in a request. I guess they haven't done it yet. And as a local official, I am screaming at my monitor and I'm texting our chair like, all we have to do is ask for it. Give me a form. I mean, at this point, if they're in a warehouse somewhere, we would send a truck to get them. The chair and I would rent a truck, contaminate each other. We would drive to them.
Take one for the team.
We'd take one for the team, and we would literally be in some county truck headed to get these things if we could get them.
Okay.
Because
Hard to argue with.
So
that
when it comes to the Trump response, overall, I just at this point can't talk, except I do know that we are not being supported by the CDC.
Okay.
Sorry, that was a long answer.
From the horse.
Thank you for questioning.
Yes. Okay. As from Connor. Hi, Connor. I have a question more about school. I still have to get a bunch of school hours for NHS. Do you know of anything I could do during this time to get those hours? Yes, a million things. Go pull weeds in your neighbor's yard, babysit some children. Yeah, there's do deliveries for your neighbors who are elderly.
And Connor, if I happen to get a lead on some tests, maybe you and I'll take the Ryder truck.
You can take the Ryder truck to DC to
Take
get
the Ryder
tests.
truck to DC or wherever it is, and we will deploy them personally.
Connor is a very smart young man. He would be a good car company, I do believe. Do you believe this time period will draw a larger divide between the two major parties or bring them closer as politicians and officials everywhere try to come up with solutions? I think it could bring them closer. I think that people who have hated on each other for a long time and thrown political bombs from their competing press conferences are going to have to talk to each other.
Yes.
And they're going to come up with things they can both stand behind, and that can't be a bad thing. I hope your generation, though, is going to help us defeat gerrymandering.
Yeah.
And then we'll have a lot more moderates in government who will be a lot more capable of working together without a national emergency having to happen.
Because this virus makes Republicans and Democrats sick. It doesn't discriminate.
That's right.
And Republicans and Democrats are both losing their jobs.
Yep.
We're all hunkering in our houses. Yep. And I hope that comes out of it. And one of the reasons I'm in local government, because a lot of people have said, well, when are you running for state house? And I have no desire to be in the state house. At local government, even though I'm in a partisan position, we're less partisan. Because when you go to set a bell schedule, that's not a partisan issue. The partisan issues are typically more around the social issues. And that happens more at the state level. So right now, feeding people, I have had Republicans, bloggers who typically make fun of me, and any decision I make, put out their spin on it, which is usually negative. And when I said, okay, this is how we all can help. Yesterday, here's the form,
Here's how you can pitch in.
Or Monday, here's how you can pitch in. I had Republicans that I consider my enemy who were saying, well, my daughter was really concerned about pets. So we got some pet food to the SPCA. And so to me, and I was like, you spending, they're Democrats, you're spending all this money and nothing. It was like, okay, we've got to deploy this money. We've got to help people. And I hope we will take some lessons from this going forward.
Okay, Mackenzie, I was just waiting for this question to come along. I have a question for Vicki. With your expertise, when do you estimate we will return to school?
I do know this was picked up in the media and some parents freaked out. Yesterday, we did get guidance from the CDC. And guidance is just that, guidance. And their guidance for the whole country is to keep public schools closed for 8 to 20 weeks. That does not mean that we have to do that. But at this point, our county services, which is libraries that are not essential, libraries, parks, things of that nature, we've pulled down for at least 60 days, which means we expect at least a 60-day window before we can start seeing some normalcy. Now, I sat with my epidemiology staff last Friday to see what they think, because they're the experts. And if you look at the bell curve of the virus, it's too. And one of the reasons the bell curve is so sharp is because nobody has immunity. The flu, when it goes through the population, it's more of a kind of bell curve. And our health system, since the flu is the biggest health event that happens annually, the capacity of our health system is right above the people who
The height of that curve.
the height of that curve, because our health system capacity has been built for that.
Right.
Unfortunately, here's the flu, here's our health system. This puppy blows the top out of it. If you look at other countries and what their caseload has done. So we don't know where we're at on that bell curve. Experts can guess. My epidemiologists, they have their idea of where we're at. But we know China is on the backside of the bell curve because they're starting to open cities up. They're still seeing new cases, but it's like 100 for the whole country a day instead of thousands a day. So we don't know exactly where they're at on the backside of that bell curve, but we think they're on the backside of it, and they're at 12 weeks. So
But they've also had so many people contract it who are now immune.
Right. So they've now got some immunity.
We're trying to prevent people from contracting it. So we're going to have fewer people immune on the other side, if there is the other side, right?
Right. There is another side.
Yeah, there is another side. Yeah, don't think there's not another side. It's just how we're going to be positioned differently than the Chinese after the peak of this.
Right. But what the Chinese have is a lot stronger central health system.
Yeah.
So that's a very long answer to nobody knows.
But I can tell you this while Mrs. Adamson gets a moment to take some water. I just want to compliment us because we haven't touched our faces this entire time.
I know. I'm really trying to do that.
I touched my glasses, but that's all I do.
The politician looked for paper and she's I don't want y'all to look back in 10 years and say, oh yeah, she's the one that licked it.
No, I've worked so hard on not touching my face.
So
But what I want to say though is I am getting it in my head, rightly or wrongly, that we're not going back to school this semester. Now I know that's a very crazy thing to say right now. But here's why I'm doing that, because here's the worst that can happen is that I, as a teacher, today's the first day, by the way, your teachers are getting paid to work from home. So you should start seeing them become active. Here's the way I'm thinking of this. If we do go back, it's going to be super compacted, what we're trying to teach you in a small amount of time. So even though I can't require you to learn new things and grade you and give you assignments because of the equity issue, I can at least give you some opportunities to learn some of the things we will be learning if we're ever together in the semester, and make that compacted instruction less stressful for you. Okay. Also, if we end up not going back this year, you will have learned some really important things that we all agree as a society are important for future citizens to know.
What was the student's name?
That was Mackenzie.
Mackenzie. I think your question brings up a lot of what all of us are dealing with, which is just uncertainty.
Yeah.
And that's why we're tense. That's why my husband and I are snapping at each other. Is the world that we thought was secure 2 weeks ago, we have found out is not. Our institutions are closing. Our employment is all up in the air. My husband's moved home with his job. So we're all dealing with that uncertainty. And that's when we just need to be a little kinder with each other.
Yeah. And deal with uncertainty as best we can, given the fact we've been a part of a culture that has convinced us that we are very in control.
Yeah.
And we're very used to creature comforts and control. And so it's hard as human beings who grew up in a culture like that to adapt to the new reality. So we don't know what's going to happen. I'm preparing for the worst and hoping for the best. And the best would be that we will be together again sooner than I would ever hope. But we got to prepare for the reality that may not be the case. We are really going long, but you know what? This is not a vanity.
If y'all have anything to do, I don't have anything to do.
So we have 17 people watching, and I know some people will tune in. So there have been many arguments in my house about quarantining. If I feel completely healthy and no one with any symptoms, do you think I should actually stay home and have no human contact? Okay, this is hard because adolescents are social animals who really don't want to be at home on the whole. So every family is having to navigate what kind of boundaries to put on their youth. And they're coming to very different conclusions. And so I have some friends who have told their adolescents or kids they cannot play. You don't play, I know, but they can't socialize with anyone else outside of the household. I have other people who are letting their children be outside together, but not closer than 3 feet. But I don't think anyone should be leaving their home right now and hanging out and touching each other in any way, whether or coming within 3 feet of each other, in any way. So what do you think?
Yeah, and most of the places you would go are closed.
Yeah.
You know, most of the anchor stores in the mall are closing today or tomorrow.
Yeah.
So the mall is going to be closed.
The movies are closed.
The movies are closed. You know, I don't know many adolescents that want to go hang out at the grocery store because that really, I mean, especially once people fight over the toilet paper. Maybe that's a sport now. Maybe that'll be the new YouTube videos. Look at these people fighting over the toilet paper. But, you know, the governor closed restaurants to seating customers yesterday. And he had asked nobody gather in groups of 100 or more. And what was happening is Glenwood South was going to continue to have their big St. Patty's Day party last night. He had to stop that because since we don't have immunity, 2 sick people, and we could have had thousands of people infected. Yeah. So that was dramatic measures, but he needed to do it. Now, just so y'all know, and I don't know if he'll ever come to this, the next step is that he will cancel non-essential services. And when you only have essential businesses open, that's basically banks, grocery stores, pharmacies, and gas stations. That means retail's all coming down. So if you need your hair cut or you want your nails done, I would advise getting that done because those services, you know, in 6 weeks, we may all know what our natural hair colors are. I mean, because we may, you know, unless you want to do it yourself. So it's so that's
I gotta comb my hair.
that's right. Actually,
Paige Howard, are you out there?
actually, I rushed last week and got my hair cut.
Well, it looks really nice.
Thanks. So I was like, because I got to be in pictures. So we, so that's the next step the government will take if it comes to that. So so hanging out would be at somebody's house, and you could probably do that to some degree and stay away from each other. Of course, I don't know if you're like my son. He gets in the room with somebody and texts them anyway. So, because
maybe we're underestimating the degree to which teenagers can hang out and not get within 3 feet of each other.
Yes, because I think he's lost the ability to talk. It's only this. So, but yeah, that's so.
I mean, look at us. My house today, the minute she touched the doorknob, I told her she'd go wash her hands. We talked about whether she'd clean them or not. She walked right in here. She hasn't touched a thing. She sat in this chair. We're at least 3 feet apart from each other.
Yeah,
like so that's the level of precautions that I think are in order.
Because one of the things is your parents have never been through this. They don't know. They don't know what's best, and I'm sure your parents are scared for you. I know I'm petrified for what's going to happen to my son. He's in college. He's in out-of-state college, and his college is closing for the rest of the year. So they're doing. So we're going to collect him tomorrow. And well, it takes a couple of days because he's a long way away. And I'm scared for what this means for his future. You know, is he going to learn what he needs to learn the rest of the semester doing it online? Because he's in a lab. So they basically have said, well, when you get back next year, we'll make some arrangements to do the, you know, we're going to go ahead and give you a grade. We're going to figure this out. But
to do the lab work.
But next year we'll try to figure out how to get you in to get you done the lab work. And I know I'm And I have very different ideas about what he needs to do than he does. But we're all worried about each other, especially people in our families. And so your parents are just not going to know right now. And, that's another person to be gentle with.
I feel like Sierra had a good question there, but I feel like Marina actually answered that question, so that's great. Marina, I'm not that clear about your question. What kind of repercussions do you think China will have due to them not being able to control the spread of this virus? Will other countries like the U.S. have more leeway with demands from China? I'm not sure what you mean by leeway with demands from China. But I do think that we're going to incentivize companies to bring their manufacturing back to America so that supply chains aren't cross-continental. And I've already heard the federal government doing that. Basically, we've had a lot of businesses go to China to produce things, and then we've been dependent upon them getting back to the United States so that we can then take those parts and add them to manufacturing here. And that's made us really vulnerable. And I think now we see our vulnerability about that, and we're going to incentivize businesses. And it's kind of a good time to do it because honestly, the standard of living in China is rising and wages are rising in China, and it's not as inexpensive to manufacture in China as it used to be. So.
And also a lot of our food supply comes from China. And
vice versa. We send a lot of soy their way.
Right. So I don't know what will happen to that in the long
term. Okay, so Jessica, a summer school, and repeating junior year. I do not think we made it through third quarter. You're not going to have to repeat your junior year. I really don't believe that you are. Here's another thing to think of. Teachers are contracted to work a certain number of days. Okay. It might be 194. I'm actually not positive what the number is. I should know it, but I don't. I just go to work when they tell me to go to work and enjoy the time I'm there. So let's just say it's 194 days. They're paying me today to work from home, and they're going to keep paying me. So the problem is if they needed to extend school into the summer, they're going to have to pay me then too to show up. So that's 100,000 teachers in North Carolina. So does the state want to spend their money on extending teacher contracts to go out beyond 10 months? They might. They might not. About 55% of the state budget goes to education already. So it's clearly a big priority for them. And that's something we'll have to ask a state legislator, which is given the limited amount of money the state has, in this health crisis, would they consider it to be a wise use of money to extend teacher contracts to employ into the summer to continue school into the summer for the number of students who would be able and willing to attend? What would that prediction look like? So this is not official Wake County policy at all. Okay. I just don't believe they're going to ask you to repeat your junior year. I don't think they're going to ask you to repeat the semester. And that's why I think it's super important. Now, they might choose to extend the semester out into the summer, but they're going to have to find money, a lot of money to fund that effort. And that's why I think it's just really important that we as teachers start creating learning opportunities for students to go ahead and learn some of this information and material to well position you as best as possible for when we do go back to school in the semester, or when you take classes next semester that are dependent upon you having learned the skills and ideas that you would have learned this semester. So that's why we don't know, but that's the kind of calculations that are going to have to be made for us to know the answer to your question. Okay. Is China getting a lot of crap from other countries because they weren't able to contain the virus? Will this affect our economic relationship with China in any way? I mean, I don't know. Crap from other countries, like what would that look like? I don't think that we're going to issue a national declaration to chastise China. I hope that our president isn't communicating messages like that because we are becoming increasingly globally interdependent and we need to be able to make diplomatic agreements that meet all of our mutual interests, and certainly sowing that kind of blame and dissension. I don't blame China for this virus. Do you blame China for this virus? No. And I think they've done a really admirable job and collectively sacrificed as a culture to try and contain it once they realized what they had on their hands. And they have an authoritarian government that has been very heavy-handed with their people to contain it. So
actually the propaganda in China is that the U.S. military released it on the Chinese people. So it kind of goes both ways. People have a little too much time on their hands.
That's right. I don't think any of that is productive.
No, it's not.
And
Because it's a
we turn our
virus.
energies and attentions to a lot more productive.
Right, it's a virus. It's not, it's just what they are.
After the virus dies down, do you think we're going to continue to limit trade with China? I think to the degree that we can, just because we're finding that having all of your supply chains globally placed makes you vulnerable to pandemics. And I think what we're going to understand now is that pandemics could become a new normal for us, or understanding the potential for a pandemic. I never really thought about a pandemic. I know they made movies about this stuff before, but I didn't watch them because I knew they'd be disturbing. So I'm kind of behind the eight ball on the whole pandemic thing. But I think moving forward, all of us will think in the back of our head all the decisions we will be making as business leaders and governmental leaders, and will be, is this pandemic proof? Is what I'm about to do, the decision I'm about to make about the supply chain for my business, or is it pandemic proof? And that will affect our trade with China, with Venezuela, with France, with
Canada,
Antarctica. So it's not just about China at all. But it's interesting that my students are getting this focused on China.
But now, if China had test kits, we would be buying them.
That's correct.
We wouldn't care where it's made at.
Nope. And I'll tell you what, China and South Korea and some other places in the East did a much better job with producing testing kits and getting their people tested.
And Hong Kong right now is the example of what to do. Because Hong Kong is a little island nation that's right beside of China. And as yesterday, they had like 20 deaths and 60 positive cases. But they have, their government is a very strong central government. So once this started spreading in China, they locked the whole country down, and people followed it, and they have a very strong public health system who kicked in, and for all intents and purposes, it has skipped them. But now they are living very different lives.
Mm-hmm.
But they're gonna, when we look back and try to say, okay, who did well, who did not so well, what do we want to look at for the future? They are absolutely going to be the example of what you need to do.
Yes, what I hope we take out of this is, how can we create systems in America that are as resilient as possible?
Yes. And
our healthcare system is nowhere positioned to be resilient and to get people to go to the doctor and get the help they need when they need it, to prevent a spread of this pandemic. And so I just hope, and our budget deficit, our national debt is not positioning us to be resilient in this moment. Our taxation system, in terms of building a nest egg for us to be resilient, has not, both at the state level and at the national level. We have cut taxes, and cut them again and again and again, which has been nice for our upper income earners, but has not created. I mean, here at the state, we're doing better off because we have $2 billion sitting around, but we also have not positioned our public schools. We've under-resourced our public schools. So now we're not ready to do online instruction because in Wake County, we don't have one-to-one computers. And why don't we have one-to-one computers? Because that's a funding issue. So we could make our public schools a lot more resilient to this moment if we had better funded them and if we had not cut taxes so aggressively for the last 8 years, I would say. So,
and see, at the county level, if we didn't have basically a savings that we call fund balance, we couldn't have deployed the $2 million on Monday. And it was critical that we had that money that we could deploy. This was my comments from I'm going to close with this. This is one of my comments I made from the board table on Monday. If anybody ever questions the value of public schools, one of the biggest disruptions we're having in society right now is our public schools, and not just in Wake County, but throughout the country, because public schools right now are not just vehicles of learning. They are administered social services. They are the hub of the community. And I hope our citizens,
really the spine of the body
of our of our society. And I hope our lawmakers and citizens who resisting defunding public education will realize going forward that if we're going to have a strong society that can fight these things, we need that. Because look what a tailspin we've been in trying to feed students to get their food through the public schools. And my personal concern, if we didn't get it up and running quickly, is some young person who's accustomed to getting breakfast and lunch at school going to run to their corner store and steal a pack of Pop-Tarts because they're hungry. And now they've got a criminal record and they're in the court system when really we failed them as a society and we didn't have food to hand to them, because now that our public schools are offline, we're reeling from that. And this elected official, if I get elected again and get to keep serving, is never going to let anybody forget that.
Wow, that's an important comment on the stakes of what the decisions you're making in this, how high the stakes are in the lives of children and citizens here in Wake County. Sierra, I just saw your question. We're going to close, but could they push Q3 back? Yes, they could push Q3 back. They could cancel Q3. But they could push Q4 back. They could have no Q4. They could do any of these things, and we don't know what they are. So we're going to do the best we can every day to position everyone, all of our students, to the best we can to be ready for what happens, and to keep learning. In the meantime, keep learning every day. And if you have tuned into this, I just want to thank you. You have learned so much, whether you intended to or not. And I've enjoyed seeing your name and thinking about you during this time period. I hope you'll share it. I want to thank Commissioner Adamson. Oh my gosh.
You'll have a good day in your house.
We got so much information from you. And we would not have received it if you had not been willing to drive over here and sit more than 3 feet away from me.
That's right.
And not touch our faces together.
That's right.
I hope you'll share this with your parents. I think they would find it to be so informative. I hope you'll share it with your neighbors. I hope you'll share it with your friends. I hope that this sets a precedent for other people in the know in this area to come share with us what they do know and help inform our students about the very real implications of social studies and civic knowledge on the way we live and act every day. Thank you, Commissioner Adams. Bye. I can't wait to class. Remember, there's 2 parts. Okay, sorry about that. Maybe I'll figure out how to edit them together, but maybe not. So, gotta go watch the kids. See ya. Okay, I press this button. Yes, and then I press this button.
Now we'll go fight over the bar soap.
Okay.